What is going on YouTube? It's your boy NevinTheBarber, and in today's YouTube tutorial we're going to be going over a crop top with a high bald taper. So to get right into today's barber tutorial, I'm going to start off this haircut using my gamma hitters to carve in my first bald line. And you guys can see that I brought this first guideline all the way up to my client's temple area, starting at his point of reference, connecting it down to the top of his earlobe. And you guys can see that the next step I did was with the lever open, followed by the 1.5 guard all the way closed. And basically, these are the 3 guidelines that I'm going to be working with to establish my fade. And I'm going to break it down for you guys very simple on each side so you guys can execute this same system. And hopefully it will work for you guys as well. So you guys can see that I'm going to erase that middle guideline between the 0.5 and the 1.5 with my half guard all the way open. And basically I'm just going to be doing lever play, closing that lever 1 notch at a time to knock out that guideline. And every time you guys close the lever, you just want to be sure to shorten your cutting stroke as you guys are going through, flicking that clipper throughout the scalp. And you guys also want to pay attention to how the hair is growing out of the scalp. Angle the clipper in which the hair is growing out of the scalp. That way you can get the most accurate cut. And to knock out this last guideline in the fade, I went ahead and closed the clipper all the way with no guard on it. So this is now cutting the hair down to a 00. And I do have my clipper 0 gapped. So this makes this step right here 100 times easier, just because the clipper is cutting all the way down to the skin. So you guys can see that I was effortlessly able to knock out our last skin guideline. And now that we have our left side of the taper complete, I'm gonna go ahead and edge up my client. And every time I do the edge up, I like to clean up the sides and create my point on the side before I go in and create the lineup. So you guys want to create a nice 90-degree angle right at the temple area, making sure that you don't push back your client's hairline. And I like to do this before I actually go in and cut the hair, because it'll keep the corners dark on the lineup and it'll almost look like you guys have enhancements on the corners even though you don't. So if you guys try out this technique, let me know what you think. I personally think it helps a lot when it comes to edging up your client in the front. And you guys can see now that I have the sides lined up, I can just come back with my trimmers and punch in our straight line. And I do highly recommend these edgers right here as well. They are made by Gamma, and if you guys want to check them out, use my code Nevin10 on the Gamma website just to save you guys some money on your purchase. But again, I do highly recommend these hitters right here. You can modify the blades and 0 gap them really easily. But you guys can see that I was able to adjust mine to hit pretty well. And right here, I'm just edging up my client on the back of his earlobe into his nape area. That way when we taper out the back, we already have it lined up and we have a nice clean foundation before we get into the taper. So now that we have that complete, we're gonna go ahead and repeat the same exact steps on the right side of my client to achieve this high taper. So first things first, we're gonna bald it out and get it all the way down to the skin. Once we have those 2 steps complete, we can now begin getting into the fade. So as always, I start with the lever all the way open, no guard, and we'll take up this guideline about 1 inch above our skin line. And you guys can see I'm just going with the scooping motion, flicking out of my client's scalp. And right on top of that guideline, we're gonna use the 1.5 guard all the way closed. So we're now cutting the hair down to a 1.5 length. And we're gonna follow that doing some clipper over comb just to blend into the bulk and make it really easy. And now we're gonna use our half guard with the lever all the way open. So this is now cutting the hair down to a short number 1 guard length. And this right here is basically blending the 0.5 guideline into the 1.5 guideline. And this right here is where your fade really takes place, and this step is really what gives the fade that blurry transition. So whenever you guys are using the half guard, just be be patient and consistent with the way that you're flicking out at that guideline, just because, like I said, this is gonna really determine how the blend and the foundation of your fade comes out. And we're just gonna attack that last skin line at the bottom of our taper, and we're just opening up the lever 1 notch at a time, going up a little bit higher each time we attack that guideline. And again, when I do my lineup, I'm gonna come back and use my razor to clean up the box area on the temple first before we go in and carve in our edge up. And now that we have that complete, you guys can see that I already had the right side of my client's lineup done. So now we just gotta connect it, going from the middle to the left side of my client's temple. And I really like doing this technique when it comes to lineups. It's really easy and simple, and you guys won't, find yourself struggling to get a nice crispy line. But again, this is just my personal way of doing my lineups. This is just how I like to do them. But again, if you guys want to try out something new, I would highly recommend this method that I do right here. And now for the top of my client's hair, my client did want to thin it out just to get that cropped look and create more texture. So every time I do a crop top and thin out the top of my client's hair, I always like to begin by saturating the crown area, making sure that everything is nice and wet. And after we do that, I'm gonna go ahead and do some slithering with my shears. And basically what this is doing is it's just cutting a very small amount of hair as I'm bringing the shears across my client's crown. And it's not necessarily taking off a lot of length, it's just more creating texture and volume when I'm running the shears through his scalp. And you guys can see that I went through a thorough amount of times. You do want to give this a go about 5 or 6 times in each direction. That way you can get some nice texture all throughout the crown area. And now that we have that done, I'm gonna go ahead and be using my own styling powder, my own NevinTheBarber volumizing powder. And with this right here, you guys just wanna sprinkle some powder all throughout the top of your client's scalp. That way you can get a decent amount everywhere and just kind of give it a natural look with your hands. And after I do that, I'm gonna lock it in with my own crispy finishing spray. And if you guys do wanna shop the very best products, feel free to go to my website at NevinTheBarber.myshopify.com, and you guys can find the best styling products in the industry. I'll be sure to include that link in the description. But again, you guys can see that the products created some nice texture on the top of my client's scalp. And to finish off this taper, I'm just gonna go ahead and blend out the back side of my client's nape area. And again, I am starting with my gamma hitters just to carve in my bald line. And when you guys are doing this, you don't want to bring the guideline too high, just because the taper will look a little off if you guys do that first guideline too high. So just be sure to keep it beneath your client's earlobe. I always like to use that as a good guideline whenever I punch in my first guideline in the back on my client's nape. And for the next step, I'm gonna go ahead and use my Gamma Uno shaver just to ball down the taper all the way to the skin. And for the next step in this taper, I went ahead and used my clipper all the way open, just as we did on both sides. And this is cutting the hair down to a 0.5 length. And again, when you guys are doing this, you want to make sure you create nice, even guidelines, because if you guys have even guidelines, it's going to create an even fade and a blurry transition. And with this next step that I'm doing here, I do have the 1.5 guard all the way closed. So we are going to bring it up about another inch right on top of our previous guideline. And we are following that step by doing some clipper over comb with the guard on it. And I like to keep the guard on it when I do clipper over comb, just because you are blending into the bulk and you guys want to be safe. You know, you don't want to put a gash in the back of your client's taper. So it's always important that you guys you know, leave a guard on there just to be safe. And to erase our middle guideline, we're gonna go ahead and use the half guard all the way open to blend the 0.5 into the 1.5 guard. And same thing, we're just gonna close that lever one notch at a time, and we're just gonna keep shortening our cutting stroke to erase that middle section. And you guys just be patient with this step. Sometimes it can be a little frustrating when you don't see the line get erased right away, but just have a consistent cutting stroke. And like I said, by the time you close that lever, that guideline should be gone for the most part. Some clients do have different hair texture and different density. So if your client does have thicker hair, sometimes the guidelines will be a little bit harder to take out, but just be patient with it, and little by little, you guys will be able to execute a nice clean blend. And if you guys can see on the back of my client's nape, he does have a few different hairs that are growing in different directions. So that's why I'm angling my clipper, just using the corner of my blade to do some corner work and detail out those last dark areas that I see. But it's very important that you guys do this. I personally like to use the corner of my blade rather than using the full blade when I'm detailing my haircuts. But you guys can do whatever works for you. There really is no right or wrong way to cut hair. And just to erase that last bottom line on my client's taper, I'm gonna go ahead and close the lever all the way. So this is now cutting the hair down to a 00. And again, like I said before, I do have my clippers zero gapped. So this does make this part of the job 100 times easier, just because you guys can flick out that guideline right away. And we are gonna be opening up that lever one notch at a time, going up this time, just because we are blending up into the fade. And little by little, you guys can see with these simple steps, you can achieve a nice, clean, blurry fade. And you guys can use these steps on any haircut, whether it's a burst fade, a drop fade, a taper. But if you guys have learned anything in this tutorial, please hit that like button. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel if you're new. And you all let me know in the comments if you want to see any new tutorials. I'm always open to trying out new haircuts and dropping new tutorials for you guys. And to finish up this taper, I'm just going to go ahead and use my gamma hitters to edge up my client right behind his ear. And same thing as the front hairline. When you guys are doing this, you just want to keep it right at that natural line, just to preserve the haircut a little bit longer. That way when your client's hair grows in, it'll still look nice and fresh. We're gonna do the same thing on the other side. And you guys can see that I'm using my trimmer almost like a pencil, just using the corner of it, the corner of the blade, to carve in that line. And I personally like to use my trimmers like this because it's, again, like I said, with the clippers, you can get a more precise cut. So whenever you guys are doing your edge ups, you guys can try just using the corner of the blade rather than using the full thing. And I personally think that you can get more of a sharper and precise cut. And to finish off this taper, I'm gonna go ahead and do some shears over comb right into the top of that blend. I always like to do shear over comb in my haircuts just because it leaves a nice clean transition from the top of the fade into the bulk of my client's hair. And it's very important that you guys roll the comb off of the scalp at a 45-degree angle. Again, that way you don't create no gashes on the top of that fade. And I also like to do my point cutting technique just to erase any last dark areas that might be in the fade. But that is about it for today's crop top high bald taper. Again, if you guys learned anything in this haircut tutorial, please be sure to smash that like button, drop a comment if you guys want to see anything else, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. But again, it's your boy Nevin the Barber, and I'm out. I'll see you guys in the next one.